Speaker Pelosi is here this evening to pay honour to Goat Hill Pizza, and I'm serious about that. And we're all going to learn about the history of Goat Hill Pizza from the man I call Goat Hill Phil, Philip DeAndrade. And he's going to be interviewed by my cousin, professor at the University of Santa Clara, Jeff Burkholder. Well, shall we?
Yes, we shall. I know Philip here not as Goat Hill Phil, but as Cousin Philip. He is one of those characters one meets in the world whose gusto, whose general love of life is so superior to one's own that I normally sort of hate those people out of pettiness and jealousy. But this man has endeared himself to absolutely everyone I think he's ever met. And we're here to celebrate that aspect of him tonight, that namely his capacity to create ties and maintain and nourish those ties in communities across a great many years and geographies. He's so vivid, the man's life is so vivid to me that I always see it as a sort of film, the Goat Hill Phil biopic film. And in that film, as sort of titles roll, we see a very young lad, a young Philip, a boy of 8 or 9, having been left home alone by his parents, always a mistake, with a sort of mischievous grin, not so, a sort of wintry smile as we see now sweeping across his face. And he's rummaging around in his parents' affairs, the naughty boy he is, opening drawers and lifting files, that sort of thing. Tell us, Philip, what's going on? Reminisce.
You caught me at 7 going through my mother and father's dresser drawers. What I found was a revelation. But that's not where this story starts. It starts with my first recollection of San Francisco, which was in the hand of my father, who was wearing a white cap, marching up Market Street in a sea of white caps commemorating Bloody Thursday with Harry Bridges, as my father was a member of the ILWU. And my earliest recollection of the city is marching up Market Street. And then not long after that, I remember myself in Oakland, California, where I was born, in my tighty-whitey shorts, sitting in a vat of grape juice in a redwood vat, moving the must while my father and his buddies were making wine in immigrant Oakland, as the Portuguese would do. But then, sort of at that same time, I was interested in what was going on in my parents' room. And so when they were not there, I wandered through and I was opening drawers and I came upon a baptismal certificate. And listed on my baptismal certificate as my mother was Albina Rodriguez. And listed as my godparents were Joseph and Mary DeAndrade. Wasn't that a shocker? Indeed. So what had happened was my 13-year-old aunt bore a child on her way to school, having had a fling probably with the boy next door, and all of a sudden there I was, and true to the immigrant Portuguese family, I was taken over by the eldest in the family, Mary, and raised by Mary and Joseph as their child, and therefore my grandmother and my aunts and uncles and my cousins are all true. And I didn't know about any of this until I was 7 years old. So that was a bit of a shocker.
So this sense of that you're discovering that you are not quite who you thought you were, what was the upshot of that with your adoptive, I'll say, true parents, who of course are named Mary and Joseph.
Virgin birth.
How did that go?
Well, it was all a surprise. I had to hide myself because I couldn't admit that I knew what was going on, because that would be to admit that I was sneaking through their dresser drawers. So I pretended the role of their child until I decided, as a young Catholic boy would, to go into the seminary in the 8th grade, after the 8th grade, at which point illegitimacy, is an impediment to orders, so I had to write to Rome to get a dispensation in order to go into the seminary. So they had to reveal my circumstances to me, which I already knew, when I was ready to go into the seminary. And they had the parish priest tell me about my background. Well, this was quite an uproar in the family. And ultimately, I had to have my birth mother have a conversation with me where I expressed that I wanted her to give me up for adoption to her older sister and her husband.
Was this experience of the seminary, the Catholic Church, was that, would you say, part of this Portuguese immigrant experience?
Oh, sure. The reality of being a child of immigrants. My parents were both born in Portugal, met in the United States. My grandmother and my mother came over on a ship to Ellis Island, came to Oakland. They met. She met my father. But I was raised in a very Catholic environment. I went to Catholic schools all the way through. And here I was also realizing that there was a little something strange about the people I was interested in romantically. Another little interesting tidbit pops up. So here I go into the seminary, where I am quickly expelled for reading unapproved books. So my first experience at seminary was I brought in a Shell Scott murder mystery, which took place in a nudist colony. And oddly enough, I was interested in a different character in the story that I thought I'd be interested in. But anyway, they found the book where I had hidden it in my clothes closet over a hanger with a jacket over that. And going through, as they were, the very clever priests.
Very thorough priests.
Very thorough, and knew what I had done, and sent me home then. Sent me home on a train from Mountain View to greet my mother, who was out mowing the lawn, to find this shock of a son with a suitcase walking up the hill, and unbeknownst to her that this was going to happen. This is how it worked in those days in that environment. So then I went to Bishop O'Dowd, Santa Clara, back into the seminary. This time I left when I was about to pledge eternal obedience to the Archbishop of San Francisco. That wasn't going to kick it. And while I was in the seminary, I began to get engaged in the community through a number of people that some of you here know. Pat Johnston, the former state senator and co-chair of the Democratic Party with Nancy Pelosi in her early career. And Clint Riley was part of that gang from the seminary. And we created with Father Gene Boyle, Monsignor Boyle, the Little Kerner Report. In the days when, remember the Kerner Report regarding religion and race, we created a Little Kerner Report to delve into the questions of religion and race in the San Francisco Bay Area. Made a horrible enemy of Archbishop McGuckin and the president, and Mayor Alioto at the time was not happy with that offering from us.
So you're coming from Oakland to San Francisco, you're getting into community organizing, incipient politics, you're coming into the orbit of important community organizers like Fred Ross Jr.
Wow.
There's Leo McCarthy.
Let's back up just a hair. So I left the seminary. It was at the time of the Haight-Ashbury. I got all involved in the an organization called the Off Ramp, where we helped kids who wanted to get back home. Well, that led me into marijuana, acid, and cocaine, but that's neither here nor there. I started with a religious motive and ended up with a slightly different approach. But it was during that time. Now we're getting to about 1967, and I'm interested in politics, and who's the person I decide I want to follow but Leo McCarthy, who I think in those days was the soul of honest politics with integrity, not power, but the good of the people. This man was so sincere. Of course, unbeknownst to me, a gentleman by the name of Art Agnos, who was about 6 years older than I and a little more politically engaged, was also involved in that party, in that race. So the night of the election, when Bobby Kennedy was assassinated and Art Agnos was going to get my job with Leo McCarthy, I went off and went crazy and got into all kinds of trouble in the Haight-Ashbury.
And not for the first time in your life does the story end with you getting in lots of trouble. There's a lot of intervening years, but you're working your way up and through San Francisco politics, and eventually entering into the orbit of the great icon.
This was 19, I think it was 87. I'm back there.
So there was the Burke.
20 years that was in acid, cocaine, and marijuana.
And some other things we'll get to later. I mean, there was other parts of that.
Now we're into 87.
We want to know how you managed to sneak your way into Nancy Pelosi's team.
So I did work hard on that campaign, and in that campaign I met some very important people in the rest of my life. The speaker, of course, but Fred Ross, whom you all remember as the most important lead organizer in San Francisco, but first with the farm workers, son of the great Fred Ross Sr., and John Burton I met. So Fred Ross and John Burton I met during that campaign. And finally came election night sometime in June, I think maybe June 3rd in 1987. And I found myself at City Hall, and I had commandeered a computer which gave me access to the precinct counts as the precincts closed. And so I got a connection with John Burton, and John Burton, knew which precincts to watch. He knew if you won this one, that one, and that one, or what the percentages were in each of the precincts. He knew when we had won the election. So we established a phone call. Now, getting the count was a question of pressing Alt F3 and the precinct number. But nobody on the Pelosi staff knew how easy it was. And so they all thought I maybe knew what I was doing. And so comes the victory, and Nancy is going to Washington, and I'm thinking, well, maybe I can try to get a job as a systems administrator. She ultimately interviewed me on my boat in Mission Creek, on the deck of the boat, and I somehow had chatted with John a little bit and had this program of information management put together that I expressed and explained. I had no idea what I was talking about. I admit it now, but anyway, it was a very successful presentation, and I got hired by Nancy Pelosi to go back to Washington with her as a systems administrator. I went to John Burton and I said, well, now, what do you think I should do for Nancy? And he said, and you can hear it, answer the fucking mail. and that was my job, to answer the mail, and the stories developed from there.
Well, speaking of the stories, can you give us a few, let's say, misadventures of Philip DeAndrade,
Well,
systems administrator, mail answerer in Washington, D.C. for Pelosi?
So getting the mail out to all the constituents and responding to all the letters that came in was my job on a functional level. Not writing the answers, that was Nancy's job, sort of. And but it was getting the mailing out. And my first job was to get an announcement of a town hall meeting, to be sent out on a little 5x7 card, and the front of the card was a picture of Nancy Pelosi. And the picture was selected, but I did the cropping having to do with the where
Nancy now sits.
And believe you me, I didn't choose well. And it was the first scolding I've ever gotten from Nancy Pelosi was that ill-chosen picture. But I did worse things. There was the government resources booklet that I sent to what I thought were the 25,000 last constituents who wrote to Nancy Pelosi. Well, in fact, it was the last 25 books that went out, the last 25 mailings that went out of the office to anyone, be it king, pope, president, lobbyist, anything. So I ended up sending Nancy Pelosi's booklets to Noriega in Panama, to a couple of, you didn't know any of these things. She learned a few of them. That mailing we learned about a year later when we were talking about the mailing budget, and she reminded me that we had used part of the mailing budget to mail the lobbyists and General Noriega, and perhaps I shouldn't do that again. That mailing also was a franked mailing, and a frank means the signature of the member of Congress constitutes the postage. So in preparing that mailer, I was supposed to have her signature embossed on the mailing, printed on the mailing. Well, I neglected to do that. So we had to have a stamp created with her signature, and the entire staff for 2 weeks was stamping 25,000 brochures with her name on it. Let's get to some real stuff now.
I think you probably, I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. You know a different Nancy Pelosi than the one we do. So how do you sum up this great?
Well, the Nancy Pelosi I know is the one you know, and that is the Nancy Pelosi who won't take no for an answer. We went to Washington, and she told the Congress that she was there to speak for the people of San Francisco and to bring consciousness of the AIDS crisis and the number of people that were dying in our community to the nation. And that, of course, was the subject of her very first speech. But my job in relation to that was Surgeon General Koop had been charged with producing an AIDS brochure, an AIDS manual with resources and all the information on how to deal with the crisis, which was to be mailed to the entire country. However, San Francisco was falling very late, and Nancy Pelosi wanted those resources in the hands of her constituents right now. And so we were commissioned to pick up those brochures, take them to a sheltered workshop. We got people to stuff the envelopes every other day. I would go to the workshop, bring boxes, take them to the post office. We went for a month mailing this brochure to the people of San Francisco because the government wasn't going to do what it was supposed to. And right after that, with regard to the AIDS crisis, from San Francisco was coming to Washington the AIDS quilt. And the AIDS quilt was getting trouble. Cleve Jones and Mike Smith were having trouble getting permission from the Park Service. And
thought they were going to ruin the grass.
They thought they were going to ruin the grass, exactly. And so Nancy Pelosi's solution was, of course, we'll raise the quilt, we'll fluff the quilts every half hour or some such thing. But again, we got it through because she wouldn't say no.
Yeah, I think no fluffing ever happened.
Another instance of where she just wouldn't say no was with the archbishops of San Francisco. You all know, probably understand, the difficulties Nancy's faith has come upon with some of the hierarchy in the church. Saint Pope John Paul II had been to San Francisco just before Nancy was elected. And we were developing a good relationship with the new Archbishop of San Francisco, Niederauer, who replaced Levada when Levada was taken off to Rome to whatever role he was going to play. So I had some connections with the church, so we started trying to establish a connection, a relationship. Now, Nancy didn't need me to establish a relationship with the Catholic Church because that's the point. We got in there with the Archbishop, and she out-fervored the Archbishop. Listening to the gospel is nothing to Nancy Pelosi. It was harder for the Archbishop to listen to the gospel than it was for the fervor of Nancy. But I know, move it along. But again, she would not take no for an answer.
What was your proudest moment accompanying her? We heard some embarrassing ones. You messed up the photo.
There's a lot of things about. We all know the Affordable Care Act. The Affordable Care Act would not have passed without Nancy Pelosi, without question. I actually think something that maybe I'm not sure everyone reflects on, but I think she lost the speakership because of the Affordable Care Act. I think she gave up the speakership knowing that we were going to lose the Congress the next year because of the Affordable Care Act, but she wasn't going to let that not pass. Her power and her role was not as important as getting that passed, in my opinion. She might tell you differently, but that's how I see it. And for the Affordable Care Act, again, she would not take no for an answer. It was gotten through. It would not stop. And she wouldn't take no for an answer about when she lost the speakership. She went back and got it again. She's getting tired of this.
Well, maybe it's time, Philip. We've covered this. We've swept through these decades rather quickly, but we need to circle back to 1975 and the founding of Goat Hill Pizza, and you're assembling all of these partners and getting us back up to this present moment. I'm going to bring back up Keith, whom I don't need to introduce, your longtime MC and the president of the Potrero Dogpatch Merchants Association, to talk about Goat Hill Pizza.
It was great to hear about your dishonorable and checkered past, Philip. Most of us, however, know you as Goat Hill Phil, the managing partner and the face of the great neighborhood institution for the last 50 years, Goat Hill Pizza. But in fact, You are not just the sole owner of Goat Hill Pizza. You actually founded it with some partners. Tell us, please.
In or about 1974, we got this bright idea, and I could never have done it myself. It was actually a woman who's not with us here tonight, whom I first brought up the idea with, and that is a woman by the name of Karen Clark, nay Karen Clark Monley. Michael Monley is here, who married into the family, although he was also part of the family as a result of my having gone to school at the seminary with him. So anyway, the Goat Hill family was a group of friends and neighbors on Potrero Hill who saw the opportunity and established a restaurant.
Did you live on Potrero Hill at that time?
Absolutely.
Oh, you did?
Absolutely. And it was Joel and Loris Lipsky, Karen Monley, Ruth Ann Dickinson, and myself. Now, Ruth Ann and I had worked earlier for a pizzeria called Red Boy Pizza, and that's where we got the bright idea to put a pizza restaurant in Potrero Hill. As you know, there wasn't...
What did you do at Red Boy, big boy?
So, interestingly enough, I had been working at Handel Boys Center in Sonoma as a CO job, conscientious objector during the war, and came back to San Francisco and thought I would like to get in the restaurant business. This seems like a wholesome, healthy business to be involved in, and so I'm interested in opening a little fancy Mediterranean restaurant somewhere. Well, I answered an ad for a restaurant manager job in the Richmond district, and there was Red Boy Pizza. I got off the bus in those days, looked at the place and thought, I don't want to open a pizzeria, how low class. But on the other hand, I decided, well, learning how to deal with the health department, ordering supplies, managing a staff, making food, this is the way I would learn to become a manager, and that's what taught me the restaurant business. No school, just learning from doing in pizzeria in the Richmond district. Yeah.
And I believe that some of your original partners have passed on, but their families and heirs are still partners in Goat Hill Pizza. And I think a few of them are here tonight, and I'd just like to see you stand up so that we can all thank you for feeding Potrero Hill for 50 years.
So that's Joe Lipsky, Michael Monley, and Kurt and Debbie Heinzenbreit, who joined us about 10 years later when we were expanding the restaurant. So the interesting thing is we are the same partners for 50 years, with the exception of all the women who have left us early. That's mean of us. I don't know how that happened. But we have the original partners plus Kurt and Debbie.
So you got together, it needed some money. Did you have an IPO to get started and raise hundreds of millions of dollars?
We were unable to raise a lot of money from all over the hill, but we went into our little bank accounts, and each of us came up with $2,000, and with $8,000 we opened Goat Hill Pizza. Try and do that today.
Goat Hill Pizza is obviously much beloved, and your community efforts are outstanding. You support every single event that ever seems to go on in the neighborhood and every school, and we saw it just last week at our Halloween celebration on 18th Street, where for God knows how many years you give away free pizza to 1,500 or 2,000 people that we had there this year. And tell us a little bit about your community efforts.
I mean, part of owning a neighborhood restaurant and being in business in a neighborhood is participating in your neighborhood. And we have always tried to support the schools in the neighborhood, the Potrero Hill Neighborhood House, the the artists of the neighborhood. You know, when we moved in up here, Potrero Hill was all working class and very much affordable housing. And right in the 70s, gentrification began, and a lot of artists and other sorts moved into the neighborhood. And one of the things we did was to become an art gallery for the multitude of artists who had their work to show on Potrero Hill. So we did that. We've done fundraisers for school kids, for the various schools, all those things.
I know very well that you were the head of the Potrero Merchants Association for about a dozen years until you suckered me into taking over that role 25 years ago.
One of the wisest decisions I could.
Which is why I'm his favorite person on there.
Sucker the day he walked into the restaurant. The Merchant Association, we started it. Karen is here, I think, with Good Life Grocery and.
Karen from Leicester for the Good Life Grocery! Celebrated their 50 years last year! Yeah, that's where I shop.
They are 1 year older than us, I guess I have to confess. And Ron Gempel from the Daily Scoop, which is now where the French restaurant is, Chez Maman. And us and Mary Price Flowers, a number of those small restaurants that existed on the hill, formed the early, we called it FAB, Potrero Hill Association of Merchants and Businesses. Tried that one on. He changed the name as soon as he got anywhere near the place.
Famed.
But you know, participating in the merchant organization, working with the community, this is what makes a small business. This is what gives satisfaction to the small merchant in the neighborhood, is how many people you relate to, how well received you are. I mean, I would walk up and down the streets of Potrero Hill and would get, there's the pizza man, pizza maker from Potrero Hill. It's very fulfilling to be part of this kind of a neighborhood and to be recognized in your neighborhood. It really means the world. I also have to give a shout out to the staff at Goat Hill Pizza, because it was the staff, you know, that really moved the restaurant along, that made it what it was. The first non-owner to work at Goat Hill Pizza was Patty Horan, and her best friend Sean Fisher was the second employee at Goat Hill Pizza. He came on as a dishwasher and ended up becoming my husband. So that kind of strange things happen. Today it would be sexual harassment. In those days it was just fun.
And who did the dishes at home?
Sorry?
Who did the dishes at home, you or him?
Oh, that's one of the reasons why we're anyway, that's a whole other story.
Philip, I don't think you called it Goat Hill because you served goat on the pizza. Why Goat Hill?
So you probably know that Potrero Hill is named for Potrero Nuevo, Alcalde de Haro's plot of land in that neighborhood. And Potrero means pasture, and it was the pasture of Mission Dolores in its early days. And the early settlers of Potrero Hill, after the 1906 earthquake and all that, people who settled into the hill raised goats and other farm-type animals, and frankly referred to one of the hillocks of Potrero Hill as Goat Hill. And so when we were looking for a name, I think it might have been Michael Monley who came up with the name Goat Hill Pizza.
Well, there used to be a couple of goats at Hilda and...
then
Hilda the goat in the backyard.
Sean Fisher,
Sean Fisher was an employee or a goat?
John Fisher, my husband, later on,
a real goat,
took us up to Sonoma, where we obtained a goat, brought her into San Francisco, set her up in the backyard, took her up again to Sonoma, bred her. She came back and had 2 kids, Bucky and Loretta, at which point the health department caught on that we had more than 2 animals of the class Capridae, which is cloven-hoofed animals, and insisted we get rid of all but 1. And so we found them a home, first at Children's Fairyland, where they were 2 rambunctious for the kids, and later at Sonoma Hospital, where they became mascots for the developmentally disabled kids up there. I have to bring attention to Michael Goldblatt, who was one-time manager of Goat Hill Pizza, who actually was the reason we created the sourdough, because we used to buy the sourdough from a company in Hayward who made sourdough. However, he had a mishap on the delivery one day, a little too much methamphetamine. He went into a ditch, and the pizza dough expanded and popped out of the windows of his delivery van. There's pizza dough all over the world. And at that point, poor Michael Goldblatt was faced with no dough, at which point he created dough that day, then and there. And the sourdough pizza goes back to, the real sourdough goes back to that event. Thank you, Michael.
To my mind, there's no better pizza. When you get Goat Hill straight out the oven, it is unbelievable. So you became a neighborhood institution, opened up some other locations. Pandemic hit. It was probably a really rugged time, but then you actually probably sold a lot of pizza to go.
Pandemic was a blessing and a curse. The curse of it was the loss of the restaurant business, the dining room, because of course people weren't going out and people weren't coming to pick up their pizzas, people were staying home. But our delivery operation expanded during that time. So it was therefore something of a blessing. But now, recovering the business post-pandemic is really in somebody else's hands.
So following the pandemic, you made the absolute brilliant move of hiring another neighborhood institution and great community leader as your general manager, Sarah Davis. And she has...
I'm sure she's here.
Where are Sarah? Hi, Sarah.
You'll see Sarah running back and forth, if doing anything, bringing pizza to every event.
So let me just say that Sarah is the daughter of Jack Davis, who ran Soma Arts for many years. Her mother was married to Chet Helms, who ran the family dog that preceded Bill Graham Enterprises. Sarah herself has been the creative director of Hardly Strictly Bluegrass for 25 years. She also, unless I'm mistaken, Sarah, I believe that you planned our 50-year Golden Gate Bridge anniversary celebration as well. She did.
And worked significantly on Nancy Pelosi's Christmas parties over the years.
We love you, Sarah. I'm just wondering if our wonderful guests, Speaker Pelosi, would like to say a few words to and about Philip.
I would actually like her to honor my partners at the same time.
We arrange ourselves. I'm going to have to get on the other side.
Thank you, Keith. What you know is never offer a microphone to a politician. Or always say yes. And I say yes to say to you, congratulations to the 50th anniversary of Goat Hill Pizza. What you see before you is not just the 50th anniversary of a Goat Hill Pizza, but a sense of community, of people coming together with a purpose, relating to the community, listening to the community about what would be wonderful to achieve. And that's really something very, very special. So Goat Hill Pizza is very respected. The pizza is delicious. I myself favor meatball sandwiches, but that's my Italian thing. But thank you all so much. So much, because you really are a model. There's nothing more, shall we say, optimistic than starting a small business, perhaps getting married, but of course you have some prospects of success. But it takes real courage, does it not, my friends?
Thank you.
It takes real courage. So I thank them for the courage, for the ideas, for the again, sense of community, which has the word unity in it, and clearly they got along very well as they did all of this. So let us salute them so much for 50 years.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. You should put that here. Thank you. And I just may want to say another word about Philip, because he sort of is the human catalyst that brings everybody together. Don't pay attention to everything he said about the political scene, because it was very incomplete. Philip is a person that everybody respected. Everybody wanted to know what he had to say. Everyone just wanted to be in his company, not just because of the pizza, but because of who he was. I'll tell you one story in Washington. He's not going to like this story. Don't tell him I told you this. Okay. Right, Paul? So we had this Jeep. It was really a Jeep. It wasn't like a Wagoneer. It was a Jeep. And Philip used to pick me up at the airport on the Jeep for this, that. But then I was gone on the weekend. So one weekend, as time I came back, and I had this parking ticket from New York City. Philip, where were you last weekend? Anyway, never one not to take advantage of wearing glasses and all the people, but really a really very, very fine person. And I mean, we all loved him. We all still love him. But he was the first person who told me that I had won the election, right, Philip? Yep. Because other people were like, well, I don't know, and pretty soon. And Philip knew, because he knew. Actually, I think he may have given pizza to those people working the numbers. But nonetheless, he came in and told John Burton, and then John Burton made it. But just let me say something about Potrero Hill. What a community for our city. What a great place. And I see... When I ran, I had the honor of having the support of Enola Maxwell. Anybody know Enola Maxwell here? And of course, I love Sophia as well. We just dedicated a building named for her. And I understand her grandson is here. I know
Edward Hatter, who we'll hear from later in the evening.
Well, I was with Enola right until her last moments. I loved her so much. We were all close. John Burton, Potrero Hill, Art Agnos, Potrero Hill. So many people that from Potrero Hill were part of our original campaign. But again, Enola was like family to me, and I loved her so much. I'm glad we're going to hear from her grandson. But let's get back to Phil. His telling those anecdotes about the political scene really do not tell the full picture of the great person that he is. He's very, very special in every arena he entered into it, whether he talked about how he prepared to be involved in a restaurant by learning at another restaurant, how he prepared to work in the political arena by working every level in the political arena, how he knew how to live on a boat before it sunk into the creek. Right, Phil?
Yeah, you got that right.
So anyway, we all benefited from what he had to say about what everybody else was thinking, whether it was on a sinking boat on the creek or whether it was at Goat Hill Pizza in a sense of community. Our office I know they love Philip anyway, but they love the pizza. They love the pizza. Thank you, Philip, for giving me the opportunity to pay my respects to you in high dars.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Philip DeAndrade and his partners at Goat Hill Pizza. Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, her wonderful husband, Paul Pelosi, sitting in the front here. We're honored to have you here. Stick around, we have a lot more for you here. This event is sponsored by an organization called Avenue Greenlight. Avenue Greenlight is an organization that funds events and gatherings for communities around the city. We're funded by 2 or 3 different billionaires around the city. I happen to be the treasurer for that organization, and my fellow directors and I are very proud to be able to support and sponsor this evening. That's Avenue Greenlight, so thank you, Avenue Greenlight.